Well, yeah, by the way, Preston, we're going to talk about it in the supercuts. We might as well just talk about it now. One of the things that was really dropped from like season 7 onwards is quite a big thing, the Faith.
Mm.
After Cersei blows them up in season 6, they're just gone and you never see them again, which is kind of weird because we're doing Fire and Blood, and you said it best yourself. Targaryen history is kind of a history of them versus the Faith of the Seven.
Yeah, for hundreds of, for 200 years or so. Yeah, the faith plays a huge role.
Realistically, like how would that even play out in the book? Because the show probably like swept the faith under the rug. Because Cersei blowing up the Great Sept of Baelor and destroying all the sparrows and the High Sparrow, that would most likely get a huge response from Old Town, especially.
Yeah. Well, that's a big interesting question because there's a lot of things in the book that feel like genies coming out of a bottle that they can never control, and within the time that's left in our story, right?
Like, give me two
Like how?
examples.
Okay, well, let's take something like the grayscale pandemic that we kind of know is going to happen, right? Like, how can you resolve that in how much time is left? 2 years, like for the story at most. Like if it spreads and it starts killing people, like how are they going to cure that by the time the story ends?
Where's the
Like I don't
grayscale
know.
pandemic going on?
Well, we just feel it because John Connington has like arrived.
Oh, you're talking about John
Uh,
Connington coming over to Westeros and infecting everybody.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And we kind of feel that there's maybe something that the House of the Undying implying that this is going to happen, but yeah, we get that we hear about grayscale for a whole story, and then John Connington arrives on land infected and is hiding it, and you just know that okay, there's going to be a grayscale pandemic. We just kind of know that this is going to be a thing, but how can you undo that? Like undoing a pandemic is going to take a long time of like careful quarantines and social distancing, you know?
I'm sure John Connington is not going to allow uh, a good chunk of his life's work, which is Targaryen restoration, to go and be ruined by his infection. I'm pretty sure he has a lid on that, or I would like to think at least. There's no way George would introduce like an actual pandemic right now, but if he has a sense of humor with what's happening in the real world right now, I mean, he
Oh, I think
could.
this was his plan from the get-go that there was going to be a pandemic. Um, so in the House of the Undying, that one of the visions that Danny sees is a gray or is a stone beast breathing fire over the land, right? And so people kind of think, well, what's made of stone that would be causing mass death and destruction? Well, some people
Littlefinger isn't
think,
his original House Sigil the Titan of Bravos.
sure, sure. I mean, there's a lot of ways to interpret it, but a common one is the grayscale pandemic, which I don't know. I think it's pretty strong. I mean, you don't introduce something like a highly contagious disease uh, into the story for no reason. Just, I mean, was it introduced just to slowly kill John Connington and make him a character that has nothing to lose? I don't know. Maybe, but or it's something that's just gonna go crazy and it's gonna be another piece of chaos.
Mm-hmm. And what's the other genie in the bottle?
Well, definitely the fundamentalism of the faith militant movement um, is and everybody's like and not to mention the to mirror that over in Essos the growth of the zealots for the religion of the Red God. I mean, these religions seem to be growing uh, like wildfire. George R. R. Martin in his writing doesn't write about religious people suddenly becoming reasonable. He thinks, he writes about them being unstoppable. Like you can't reason with them. Their religion is just they're zealots. They're gonna believe what they're gonna believe, and there's nothing we can do. How do you stop, fundamentalists? I don't know. It takes generations to educate people properly, and so I that's another one where like besides killing everybody, how are you going to resolve that plot? Like, are all these zealots suddenly going to sit down and go, no, science is the way, or rational thinking is the way.
Well, it hasn't worked for people in real life, so I doubt it
Yeah,
will
exactly.
in medieval times.
QAnon,
Oh
like.
God.
I mean, Jesus. I mean, QAnon person is now like won a primary in America. Jesus. Um, so there's a few things like that. Um, and I mean, not to mention just all of the political problems that are just never gonna uh, be figured out, or the weather problems, or the famine problem that's about to hit. Like, how are you gonna solve that? Like, it's wintertime. They're running out of food. There's 2 years left in the story. The only solution is, oh, the winter ends and then they plant food and they start growing it. So you're talking like something 5 years in the future, 7 years in the future, to like solve this problem. It's I don't know. I don't know how all these problems are going to be solved.
But
Magic, I
realistically, like
guess.
Cersei versus the Faith, if she blows up, even in the show, there had to
Yeah,
be some sort of response from Old Town, which we never really got in the show. And of course, they have other problems to
and the
worry about.
public, and this is the problem, is the people that were in that sept when it got blown up that was few and far between. We had a scene where Jaime marches down with the Queen of Thorns and Mace Tyrell to storm the sept, and then he can't because the public is there, this huge crowd, and the king comes out and says, "Oh, the church and the crown are one," and everybody cheers. And why didn't Jaime just go and slaughter everybody? Well, I think the reason is because there was this huge crowd of people, and he had won over the High Septon had won over the people of the city. And then you blow up the sept, and the people of the city are just like, oh, I guess Faith of the Seven isn't a thing anymore.
The problem with the High Sparrow is you kill him, you make him a martyr, and then the whole thing spreads like wildfire. And
Absolutely.
the impression I got, because it always frustrated me. Season 6 really frustrated me because they could just go in there and just murder him, and with a squad of like Kingsguard or some of your best guys, go in there and murder him covertly, make sure nobody says anything. And I think the reason they never did is because they're fearful the people would revolt, and there's way too many of them. Like that's the impression
Yeah.
I got, which I would understand, but we got no revolt. We didn't get Cersei, which would have been more realistic, trying to put down a revolt. For me, like what I would have done writing the show is she blows up the Sept of Baelor and then blames it on Daenerys, who lands like a week later.
Yeah, that would have been so much better. But instead, Hot Pie says that Cersei blew up the sept, and everybody's just fine with it. I mean, could you imagine, like, who could get away with blowing up the Vatican? And everybody just being like, okay.
Okay. Like, you would expect
I mean,
everybody to be, like, tired of war at this point, and it's hard, it's really weird, like, reading Fire and Blood with you, and the faith
right.
is going up against the Targaryens, tooth and nail, fighting them tooth and nail, constantly, not letting up. And then by the time we get to A Game of Thrones, and they're just kind of a shadow of what they once were when they did go up against the Targaryens. It's all bark, no bite, and we even barely get any bark at all until the sparrows come up.
It's just odd. I mean, like, our society, tell people to wear masks, there's mass protests. Murder a man, a police officer murders a man, mass protests. Like, people get upset over things.
That is true.
Blow up the freaking Vatican and kill the Pope? Like, yeah, that's huge. Okay? You killed the Pope and blew up the Vatican. You'd think at least some people, I mean, it's ridiculous that there wouldn't be 100 people, 1,000 people, half the city. I mean, these are very religious people. This is a religious time. This isn't even like today. Like, if they killed the Pope and blew up the Vatican today, it would be helter-skelter. And this is a less religious time. Like, the faith that, like, everyone believes the faith of the Seven back in Westeros. Like, everyone is a devout follower, pretty much. Especially small folk, and but oh well. Now, I will say that there in the book, there is a forgotten religious movement that George R. R. Martin just kind of, messes up, and it doesn't come back.
Which one is that?
But so I think what had happened is he was planting seeds for what eventually becomes like the Sparrow movement, but then just kind of forgets about his first attempt at it. So in A Clash of Kings, a bunch of religious zealots start appearing.
Oh, the ones who were sent to the wall.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't remember, we actually discussed this in the previous episode of the podcast. Essentially, the end world conspiracy guys, religious zealots, most of them were sent to the wall, and the theory was that they would cause a problem for Jon Snow at the wall when they got there.
Yeah. But no, they just disappear. They just vanish from the plot.
There's way too much stuff going on at the wall, though. You got the wildlings, you got Jon, you got Stannis arriving. Way too much. Mance Rayder's little like foray into Winterfell.
Alardim. So in A Clash of Kings, there's Janos Slynt's second in command, who may or may not have actually been the person that killed the Robert's baby with the sex worker in A Game of Thrones. Alardim, and they keep saying his name, and it's such a weird name that it just kind of sticks in your head, like Alardim, and they mention it like 3 or 4 times, and then Tyrion sends him to the wall with Janos Slynt, and then he
wait, isn't he thrown overboard?
Well, he says to someone, "Hey, if you throw this guy overboard, no one's gonna think twice." And so that's the implication, is that he's thrown overboard, but there's no confirmation that he's thrown overboard. He could have actually made it to the wall, and he's just one of the brothers in the Night's Watch. In fact, I hope he is one of the brothers in the Night's Watch, because why? They kept saying his name, and it's such a weird name. Why? They didn't even need to name the guy. They could have just, called him whatever, Pate, and had him throw overboard. But they name him Alardim, and then he disappears. I don't know. But
if anything, it sounds like Alardine is actually a guy George probably knows in real life, and probably put him in the book just to put him in there. Like we have with the next. Apparently, George put a contest out there to save the wolves, and whoever donated the most money got to be in his next book and die in his next book. You know what I'm talking about? So maybe that's what it is.
Who knows? It's just such a weird thing. He's just. I don't know. I mean, Tyrion has this whole conversation with him, and then he's just like, tell the I think the quote is, "Tell the captain it would not be taken amiss if that one should happen to be swept overboard before they make it to Eastwatch." Now, he says that's not even a command. He just says it would not be taken amiss. If somebody told me, "Hey, if you want to kill somebody, go ahead and kill them," I'd be like, "Oh, why bother? This guy's going to the wall. Why should I go out of my way to murder somebody?" But instead, they do it for some reason. Why? And this is the captain. It's not the ship is owned by the crown. They just pop him on a merchant ship. They don't mention any money that they're paying to the guy. If you just say to a captain, "Hi, can you please murder one of the people on board?" Why would you do it? There's no motivation for this captain to murder Alardim. But we never hear from him again, so I guess we have to assume that Alardim is dead. But if he shows up in the Winds of Winter, I'll be very happy. I'll be like, "Alardim!" Oh my God. Dude, if you do a reread or a re-listen to A Clash of Kings, the name just sticks out, and you can't unhear it. It's just fucking Alardim.
If anything, you would think that this would be the perfect character for Cersei's plan. Didn't you have a plan in Feast for Crows where she wanted to send assassins to kill Jon Snow at the wall?
That is another that's kind of a half-dropped plot. So she does have a plan. She's supposedly going to send. So Qyburn has this plan saying we should send people to the wall to murder Jon Snow, physical human beings, and then he is murdered at the wall by
Bowen Marsh and
by Bowen Marsh.
Yeah.
But and maybe they're doing it to please Cersei, but that's not the plan that was specifically laid out. The plan was send guys on a ship, get there, have them do the murder, not have like existing members of the Night's Watch who we know from previous books do the murder. Um, so it's kind of there, like elements are there, like and there's definitely theories of people saying no, he's doing it to please Cersei, which I think that's good theory. That at least is part of his reason. I think maybe he had a dozen reasons to stab Jon Snow, but um, but the actual Qyburn plot disappears, or maybe I don't know. Maybe they're there. It's hard to say. Everybody gets sent to the wall, and then it's a drop plot, like these zealots from A Clash of Kings. But like completely different religious zealots have started popping up in the city, and then their movement disappears. Like like you think it's going to be something. Like Varys says, oh, all of these like you know end of the world religious zealots are appearing. And Tyrion kind of goes, it can be expected. It's almost the year 300. Whatevs. Let's arrest a
Well,
few.
it just
And
makes me
then,
wonder, like, what the hell is going to happen with all these like storylines coming together, just waiting to go off? Like,
yeah.
so many of these locations are starting to look like powder kegs. Like, you have Old Town with Euron on his way there, Sam and some faceless men assassin running around. Not to mention the Sorella Sland plot. Sprinkle in some brave companions who might show up, and then
Yeah.
over in Marine, the Ironborn again. But you also have slavers going to war with Dany, the Martells, being involved in their own way, Jorah and Tyrion and the dragons flying around, and then we have the stuff going on over at the Wall. It's
I,
just so much stuff.
well, the wall, I mean, the wall is currently chaos at the end of the story. So,
Isn't there a
um,
giant running loose in the Wall?
yeah, there's a giant
At the Wall,
running
I'm sorry.
loose. Yeah, there's a giant running loose. And Jon Snow has just been stabbed. And meanwhile, the Northmen who support Stannis, the wildlings who support Stannis, are there, but the Night's Watch has now had a mutiny, so it's gonna be chaos. So the Queen's men, the Northmen, and the wildlings who all support Stannis are now hearing that Stannis is dead, and the Night's Watch, who for there's definitely a huge faction of them that was worried about this, but worried that they were going to be portrayed as Stannis supporters, like dealing with this. So
And supposedly Mance Rayder has been captured in Winterfell, and he has the skins of his wives to
right,
keep him warm while he's outside in the
yeah.
freezing cold.
Not to mention there's like 90,000 wildlings under the control of the Weeper who are going to attack at any time. There's the others. I mean, it's a lot of problems. A lot of
Fake
problems.
Arya incoming with Tycho and the Astoris.
Yeah,
So much.
yeah.
Jesus Christ. And what annoys me is too is George most recently said, "Hey, no new book this year, but next year, definitely."
Yeah, yeah, no, yeah, his blog post was depressing.